Next, we talked to Jeff Adkisson, the Executive Vice President of the Grain and Feed Association of Illinois, about the status of this year's harvest, as well as the need for Illinois to improve its aging lock and dam system so that the state can continue to successfully export its agricultural products throughout the world. This runs about 13 minutes.
Jeff Adkisson, thanks for joining us again on the Illinois Channel. We wanted to, as we get into the fall here, the harvest in Illinois is underway, and people probably know that agriculture is the #1 industry in Illinois. What can you tell us about how this year's harvest is going?
Terry, I appreciate the opportunity to be on the Illinois Channel again, and always good to join you. You know, the harvest this year has been tremendous, to say the least, to start with. We have had such a phenomenal growing year, such a year of moderate temperatures, but yeah, we've had some heat to be able to bring the crop along and do the things that it needs to do. And it's really produced, it's been great to see what the genetics out there can actually produce. So we've had good growing conditions. We've had a good planting time, good growing time, and now the harvest time is upon us. And so as this crop is coming out of the field and coming to our members are the grain elevators and feed dealers around the state. We're essentially the ones that when it's harvested, it's brought to our facilities. We are seeing phenomenal yields throughout the state of Illinois, unlike what we've ever seen before. And you know, some yields that in the past people would have been extremely proud of, they're almost embarrassed to sometimes to be able to say, well, I'm only yielding 230 bushels to the acre, because they know people in their trade territory who are getting significantly higher yields. The harvest has gone very well. We have had extremely good weather conditions to be able to get out into the field. The crop has really dried down well, meaning the corn and the soybeans have really dried down well, so that they are coming into the elevator with decent quality, good to decent quality. We've seen some issues of some certain kinds of a mold, I guess I'd say. It's called diplodia, a little bit of ear rot on some of the corn that's come in, but overall the quality has come in very well.
Before we go any other issues, let's remind people, for all of those of us who don't work in agriculture, we see these grain elevators dotting the landscape in Illinois, and there's a lot of us who are city folks who really don't understand what they even are for. Can you tell us again, what are these grain elevators about, and how do they play a role in the harvest?
Essentially, the grain elevators are, the purpose is to store the grain, condition the grain, and hold it until such time as the marketplace wants it. That's the easiest way to say it. When a farmer harvests his grain and it's in the combine, he puts it in the truck, he's got a couple of choices. He can either, if he has grain bins himself, he can take it to his own grain bins and store it there. If he doesn't have grain bins or doesn't have enough capacity on the farm, that's the role of the commercial grain elevator. We then accept the grain at harvest time. We'll grade it. We will take the moisture, and if it's and then the farmer will unload it. Corn or soybeans, either one. If they are too wet for proper storage, then we will dry it down and we will store it there at the elevator until such time as the farmer is ready to sell it. Corn typically comes in this time of the year, 20 to 25% moisture. Could be a little drier than that. And in essence, we will dry it down to 15% moisture for corn. That's a good moisture for it to store at. If it's much wetter than that, you can start to get deterioration and the grain rots and causes problems. But we dry it down, store it until such time as the farmer's ready to sell it. And then essentially, we're where the farmer gets his paycheck. When he sells his grain, he will come to the grain elevator and will then, get his paycheck, get his check for the crops that he has produced for the year.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point that people really don't know. So they take the crop out, they bring it to the grain elevator. That's where they get paid on how much grain they bring in. Another interesting aspect, though, I think people don't realize the level of business that just one grain elevator can do. It's actually phenomenal. What some people would almost think of as a big business. It's not just a little mom and pop operation. How much revenue on average would move through one grain elevator?
I grew up on a grain and livestock farm, and until I came to work for the association, I did not realize the amount of, the volume of dollars, I guess, for lack of a better word, that flows through the grain elevator. Our dues for our organization are based on what we call gross volume of sales, and our highest category, our lowest category is under $1 million, and we have very few in that category. We get into our top category is over 125 million, and we're getting more and more companies into that area. If you think about how much money flows into the farm economy, where those farmers, how much money they're receiving, and that varies from year to year depending on prices of grain, but it can be in the tens and even hundreds of millions of dollars that flow through the grain elevators. Our members, the managers of these companies, they may only employ 5, 6, 7 people, but yet they are in charge of multi-million-dollar operations that are surviving on fractions of a cent per bushel. When we have a lot of volume, that's a good thing for our industry in that the more volume, the more potential for profits that are there. In years when there's a drought or very low production, those are years that really our industry really struggles because we don't, there's not as much margin there to take.
You had mentioned earlier about the yield and offhandedly kind of talked about some of the developments and changes within the crop and the hybrid nature. Is that some of the issues that sometimes people in Europe are not wanting to take that? But how has the average yield per acre in Illinois changed, say, over the last 20 years?
Well, I don't know the exact numbers, but if you look at the amount of grain that is produced today, I mean, when I was growing up on a farm, if we got 150 bushels the acre, that would have just been phenomenal. Now we're looking to easily over 200 bushels to 250, 260, 270, and there's even some reports of individuals receiving over 300 bushels to the acre, nearly double of what it was when just a short time ago when I was growing up. So we continue to see the improvements in genetics of the seed. We continue to see improvements in the management practices of farmers. We continue to see improvements in the fertilizer technology and things, other inputs that go into the crop to make us into the situation where we continue to be the world producer of corn and soybeans.
Let's talk a little bit about regulation. There's two areas. One, on an ongoing basis, you always have the issue of grain dust and safety, and so occasionally we hear about some tragedy happening of someone being buried by corn. The other is a recent EPA ruling that would change the definition, I guess one would say, of what is a navigable waterway that the EPA now has control over. They're trying to extend it to basically any water standing anywhere, even if it's a rain runoff just sitting in a farmer's field. Can you give us your thoughts on those issues?
Yeah, that's something they often refer to as WOTUS, or Waters of the U.S. And the EPA has come out with regulations that would require some additional permitting and requirements on really any water that is in the U.S., not just navigable waters. And we have a concern with that in the permitting requirements and what is required and what's not required and the timing and all of that. We think that the EPA really needs to go back, US EPA really needs to go back and rescind those or recall those, whatever the proper word is, to take a look at that. We don't think it does what they want it to do. One of the things that I've said is, business likes certainty. Business thrives when there's a certainty in the environment they operate in. And when you've got these additional regulations like this that keep coming down the pike, regulations that can set you up for failure, more or less, then it's a problem in the business environment because we do like certainty, and this is creating uncertainty.
On the area of safety in the farm, is there any new developments there, or is it just more like in every industry, you just have to pay attention to what's going on in the environment you're working in?
Well, this is a good time of the year to talk about farm safety. Like a week or two ago was Farm Safety Week, and it's imperative that people do take the time to be safe at this time of the year. We continue to hear of tragedies that occur throughout Illinois and throughout the country as it relates to whether it's on the farm or at a grain elevator or things like that. We have a very high degree of focus on the area of safety. We have 2 staff people that just go out and do safety training at commercial grain elevators. We're involved with an organization called the Grain Handling Safety Coalition, which is a very diverse group of individuals from producers to university to volunteers to insurance companies that are focused on grain handling safety and have developed curriculum and training materials. So we do take this very, very seriously and would encourage people to take that extra time to be safe. One of the main things they can do is there's a program called lockout tagout, which is basically putting a lock on a piece of equipment from where it would be energized, or basically where you could turn the equipment on. Put some kind of a lock and tag on that so that nobody else can turn that on. We find that probably 60 to 80% of the accidents that occur in and around grain handling facilities, and probably even on farms, could be prevented if they took that one simple step of lockout and tagout.
And lastly, and we don't have a whole lot of time left, but we recently toured the mill price locks and dams, and the issue is that America needs to rebuild the locks and dams all the way up the Mississippi River, not just in Illinois, but I think there's 29 or so locks and dams, and that most of them are past their shelf life, as we might say. What are your thoughts on that and the impact that the aging of our locks and dams have on the ability to export grain from America?
Well, we're going to continue to be the breadbasket of the world, and we have to be able to provide our goods to the rest of the world. And the lock and dam system, the river system, has proved to be one of the most efficient movers of corn and soybeans out of the Midwest to its destinations worldwide. The last thing we need is a catastrophic lock failure and allow the system to break down. We encourage the system to get upgraded, to move forward, so that we can continue to be the breadbasket of the world for the next the next 100 years, as we have been for many of the past. So there's been a movement to try to increase the barge fuel tax. The industry supports that. The barge industry supports that. The producers have indicated support for that. It's just a matter of Congress moving forward with that, and just the hesitation to pass any kind of a tax increase in an election year. So we would hope that they can get together, move forward, and get that tax passed, which will help put more money into the trust funds that's needed to improve the locks and dams.
All right, Jeff Adkisson, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Terry.
You're watching the Illinois Channel.